Hey there, Blue here, and welcome to the very first Yin Yoga session. Today we're going to be starting off with some basic movements for hip, groin and lower back release. So let's get straight into it. Okay, so before we get started, make sure you have the appropriate support nearby. Today we're going to be using 2 blocks and a blanket, or a folded up towel is fine. And just have them nearby, within reach. And I recommend having some relaxing music playing as well. So we will shift ourselves forward and just gently make our way onto or into a reclining position here. Let the soles of the feet melt down into the mat. Let the space between the heels and the ball of the big toe sort of lengthen. So that space between, or that space that creates the arch of the foot, let that soften, and that'll probably just allow your knees to knock in towards one another. Or you could rest a block there in between the knees if that's easier. You can let the feet spill out, or walk the feet out to the side a little bit further if that works for your anatomy. So we're allowing the body to sort of fall into these positions. We're not controlling poses or trying to create forms. So allow yourself to just sit back into the mat and just observe for a moment. In Yin Yoga we do a lot of observation. We're sort of just allowing things to fall into place. And you might notice where your breath is. And we don't use much controlled breathing, if any, in Yin Yoga, so we're just noticing where the breath is sitting. As we move through certain poses, you'll notice slight, subtle changes in the breath. So we're really just giving ourselves time in these poses, in this practice, to create that really acute, that really high definition understanding and connection between mind and body. And of course the breath is that connection. So first things first, notice where your body is. Notice where you are in space. And we're really getting to know ourselves in Yin Yoga. In the more Yang practices, we keep the mind focused and occupied with complex movements and breath, or controlled breathing. In Yin Yoga, we're not creating anything to keep us focused. We're completely leaving the space up for observation. We're completely leaving it all out there. So for this reason, Yin Yoga can be one of the trickiest styles to actually practice, because there's very little escapism going on. So notice where the mind is as well. And if you can, just allow yourself to fall into this space. If you're here on the mat, then you've probably allocated yourself this time for this practice, so let yourself have it. And a lot of thoughts are going to come up, a lot of resistance are going to come up. And be accepting. Be in a space of non-judgment. A space or a place of witnessing. Without labels or without opinions. This is where we want to be, or as close to anyway. So let yourself become a little bit heavier See if you can imagine the muscles melting around the bones. And then very slowly we're just going to rock the knees over to the right hand side. And don't worry too much about where the feet are located or what the alignment feels like or where you should be in the pose. Instead, just notice what's happening. Notice what parts of your body are lengthening, what parts are shortening. And notice if there's any parts of you that are sort of recruiting, any parts of you that are resisting. Where's the tension? And just rocking from side to side, that's all we're doing. And your breath is there, but without effort. And we'll keep going just for a few more moments. Try to let your gaze become soft. Stay with it. Once again, noticing as much as you can. How has your mind reacted so far? Are we accepting? Or are we predicting? And now we might just come back to a neutral position and just gently rock from side to side into the hips. Not moving the knees too much, just to neutralize a little bit and just to set ourselves back into the center of the mat here. Just to bring the weight back into the tailbone. Take any small movements need be. We always take a little bit of time for counter movements or to reset after these poses in Yin. Next, we're going to bring the right knee up and place the right foot just resting on the left thigh there. Now, first things first, we're going to grab one of our blocks and just play around with where that foot might sit on the block as we rock over, lifting the right hip off the ground. And that might feel quite nice. We could always play with placing the block down a little bit further. Remembering we're in these poses for a good few minutes, up to 5 minutes in each pose. So often the ambition can bring us further into the posture than we actually need. And you might have it in your mobility to go a little bit further. Do we need to go a little bit further? Will it add to the pose? Asking ourselves these questions. And whenever we sort of move into a new posture and we find our spot, we find our edge to sit in, we want to just quickly reflect and notice how has the rest of our body reacted? Have we created tension anywhere to sort of accommodate for this movement? And the practice is to create as little tension as possible. We don't want to get muscles involved with this. In these lovely, really passive twists, you can allow yourself just to melt in, allow the upper body to melt into the floor. Allow the weight of that right foot to melt down onto the block or wherever it is. Allow the supporting knee of the left leg to sort of melt away as well. You might notice it sort of falls down towards the floor also. Don't try and maintain anything, just see what happens. Sometimes we have this idea about what the postures might look like or might feel like, and we sort of sit in that because it's familiar, but see where your body goes. See how heavy that right foot can get. Come back to your breath. And once again, it's very handy to have some relaxing music playing. Because there's so much space in between movement, the stillness can be difficult for the mind at first. And just letting it all go. And see if there's any muscles that could let go a little bit more. Even though this pose is so simple and so passive, can we let it become even more passive? Is there any tension in the face, in the neck? Bring your awareness back to your breath without controlling the breath. We want the breath to be there like a metronome. And then we will start to change sides. So bring this right knee up, lift it away. Notice how the body sort of stabilizes itself. Place the right foot back on the ground, moving slowly, and once again start to rock the hips from side to side here. And then we might, when you're feeling ready, when you're feeling reset, start on the other side. So make sure your block's in reach here. Place the left heel on the right knee. And then starting again on this side, making sure we're accommodating for the asymmetries of our body. Now this left side is always a little bit more resistant for me, so that I might not lower it down as far. Maybe a few moments of breathing and acceptance and allowing will sort of allow it to happen. Now I noticed immediately I started pressing my foot down towards the block instead of allowing myself to rock in. And these are these little minute sort of cues we want to notice, whether we're sort of trying to get our body to do things. Or whether we can just accept where our body is. Now, it doesn't matter how much yoga we do, the ego is always there. We're always going to want to achieve. Now, I feel a little bit of release in the hip now. I feel like I might even be able to bring my foot over. And your foot might be on the ground, it might be up a little bit higher. It doesn't matter. If the left shoulder's lifting a little bit, that's fine. If it's not creating tension, if it's not creating discomfort, pinching or sharp pains, if you feel a gentle opening in the lower back, muscular discomfort is fine. We don't want to feel pressure in between the joints. So get to know the difference. Sharp pains are always a sign that we've gone too far or that movement might need to be modified. And finding your breath again. Now this leg for myself doesn't seem to get as heavy as the right leg, and I always find that interesting. There must be something in there holding it back. So I'm just breathing into this left leg, and I'm just sort of reminding it that it doesn't need to hold on. And muscles are there to not only move the body around, but to protect the body from harm. So muscles will tense up in areas to try to restrict extra pressure on joints, or restrict movement to stop us pushing ourselves too far or bending too far into things. And when we get really good at the poses, or really familiar with poses in Yang practices, where they are ambitious poses, we can start to push ourselves beyond the edge. So it's nice to check into these really passive practices, just to regain that awareness. Let's take a few more moments here. And we'll come back up to a neutral position, lifting the left leg first, and just allowing ourselves to rock back in to the center of the spine, or the weight to rock back into the center of the spine. Let's find a little bit of side to side movement here. Now we're not looking for any pelvic tilts or anything, because that would require quite a lot of recruitment in the front body. So we're just letting the weight of the navel ground down through the spine and lengthen. And let yourself shift back into neutral weight, no more movement here. Take a deep breath in. Open the mouth, exhale, purge anything out, anything that's left over from that pose. And we'll begin to make our way into our next pose now. So make a really nice passive transition up into a seated position here. Now, just having those two blocks within reach, we're coming up into our yin variation of Buddha Konasana. So make sure this works for you. Whatever needs to happen in terms of alignment, make sure it's available for you. If the legs are separated a little bit, if the feet are in towards the groin a little bit more, have a play around with it. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to roll this, sort of double this yoga towel over. I'm going to sit myself up on the edge of that and just roll my pelvis forward here. So I'm not recruiting anything, I'm just spilling in without any effort at all. Now I'm just shuffling the feet around, and that feels about right there. So I want to bypass any sort of muscular restrictions and just start to work in to the connective tissue, the fascia here. Now, from here, instead of drawing myself in or taking any sort of getting too yang about it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to place the block in between my feet. And I'm just going to allow myself to fall in here with the forehead on the block. And just shifting around, I'm just going to elevate myself a little bit to allow a further forward tilt on my pelvis there. And sometimes with these poses, at first, especially when we're used to immediately feeling things, at first it might not feel like anything's happening at all. So play around, we can always move in deeper. And just sitting into the posture. you'll notice there's a place for your arms. You'll notice your body sort of finds its place. It's a very intuitive practice. It's a very mindful endeavour. And I'm just letting the shoulder blades sort of separate away from the spine. And your mind is going to race. It's going to want more. It's going to get hungry. Just allow the body to catch up for a moment. You're going to feel like you're not doing enough. I just shifted the block a little bit there so the forehead could rest on it. So I wasn't sort of squashing my nose there. Make sure you shift around. Make sure you're constantly sort of letting your body, giving your body space to melt in, basically. Find your breath again. And what we're looking for is a sort of what's called a phase change. And that happens after a couple of minutes, even as short as a minute sometimes, where the muscles sort of let go, the muscle fibers let go, and the body stops holding you in place. It's a beautiful feeling. You feel this release. And I can feel around the back of my body, the back of my hips, my glutes. You feel a bit of a tingle, you'll feel a bit of a fuzz there. And that's the muscles responding to the prolonged lengthening. At first they're going to kick in and hold you in place and make sure you're safe, but as we breathe gently and slowly, we're signalling the sympathetic nervous system that we're fine, we're okay. And at first we'll twitch and we'll move around, and that's fine. Eventually we want to get to a point where we're completely still, we're just in breath. But don't be hard on yourself at first. If Yin Yoga is new to you, then the body, or the mind especially, will be totally resistant. You might find you'll get itchy, or you'll start hearing sounds outside of the house, or you'll hear things move around. The mind will look for things to do, reasons to justify its existence. And its existence is justified, but not in every single moment. So come back to your breath. And you could have elevated your knees on a block, or you could even be supporting your knees with a block here if you like. That's fine as well. If you feel any tension in the knees. And just stay with it for a moment. Just be here, just be in the posture. Notice what parts of you are releasing, what parts of you are resistant, what parts of your body are swelling, expanding with your breath. Stay with it just for a few more moments. If the mind wanders, just bring it back. You'll probably find a point where you can just let yourself become a little bit heavier, let your upper body melt down a little bit more, let the knees spill away from the midline a little bit more. And let's take a deep breath in here. And a nice long exhale. Walk the hands back towards the body. Lifting ourselves up. If the eyes are closed, gently opening the eyes. We'll get that block out of the way for a moment. Take a deep breath in. Open the mouth, exhale. Purge out anything that's left from the pose here. Bring the knees up in towards the body. Always taking counter movements. Notice as you rock the knees from side to side, you might shift yourself off the support there for a moment. Notice as you shift the knees from side to side, the release out over the hips there. A lot happens when we sit still and sort of allow it to happen. And then we'll come back to a neutral position, or we'll come back to a neutral position here. I'm going to sit back up on my support, my little rolled up yoga towel there, and I'm going to bring the right foot in, and it's going to come in just towards the left knee. So basically my toes will be somewhere nearby at the left knee. Now what I'm going to do here, in fact I'll do it on the other side. I'll bring the left foot in, and I'm going to place a block underneath my right knee. Now that might be 2 blocks. They might not need a block at all. Play around with your alignment here. Let the pelvis roll forward. And we're going to do the same thing again. We're tipping in. Now what we're looking for is a deeper opening in the hip out here. You can extend the leg a little bit more if you like. We don't want tension in the knee. So make sure that block is supporting your knee. Now we can do 2 things here. I quite like to rest my chest on the block. It's quite nice. And let myself curl over. Or the forehead can be resting on the block as well. Now I find if the forehead is on the block, it sort of takes away from that lovely hinging. So instead I'm going to rest my chest, my sternum on the block. And this can be a really deep posture. So enter slowly, enter with care. I'm already feeling this beautiful opening in here, and I may have even gone in too far. And remember, we're here for a few moments. And especially when you're starting out, you don't want to put yourself in positions of too much discomfort. We want to know our edge. We don't want to be conditioning ourselves to ignore pain or potential injury. However, a little bit of discomfort is very, very necessary for some release sometimes. Sharp pain is never the answer. Pinching is never the answer. A dull ache is pretty well acceptable across the board. And I can feel this beautiful lengthening happening in my hip here, and it's actually that fuzzy feelings occurred where the muscle's starting to release. The body allocating extra oxygen, extra blood to that area. The breath is softening here. Always checking back into the breath. That's our metronome. If your metronome speeds up, maybe we've gone too far into the pose. Even see if you can let that metronome slow down. See if you can soften over the back of the neck. And let yourself be in the stillness. Just a few more moments. And we'll come back out. Gently, gently lift this knee back up. And once again, take some movement here. Notice how much has happened. Notice what that leg feels like. And then we'll start again on the other side here. So the right foot's going to come in. You probably notice this right leg sort of rolls out really nicely now after all of that opening. Repositioning yourself on your rolled up towel here, and remembering this leg might react a little bit differently. So we're just sort of playing around with our alignment here. And don't try to do too much. Propping up the knee with the block. And for some of us, we might not need a block at all. I'm going to place a block there, just on my chest. Just for a little bit of support. I'm going to try and expand out over the back of the neck and let the crown melt down towards the floor. Notice if you need to shift around. Notice if you need to readjust. If you can stay in the posture, if you're not in danger of injuring yourself, then why not? Stay here, give it some stillness. Let yourself melt in. Bring your awareness back to your breath. Maybe you will feel that phase change. I just had a little bit of a phase change there in the left hip, so I can actually allow myself to fall in a little bit further here. So every now and then that edge will move, and we can just find that edge again. And we're always sitting at about 60 or 70% of our mobility. We're never trying to utilize all of the mobility. We find that point of resistance, that point of a little bit of discomfort, and that's our edge. Just a few more moments here. See if you can get a little bit heavier. And then walking the hands back towards the body, lifting away. Gently, 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 always moving out of these poses really slowly. Never rush the exit phase. Now I'm going to sit down off the block, bring the knees out nice and wide, and gently just rock from side to side here. And then I'm going to move my little yoga mat out of the way, lower myself down. Now, from here, just lifting up onto the smallest height, the lowest height of the block, bringing the ankles together, lowering the knees out to the side. Elevated Supta Buddha Konasana, Yin variation. Take any adjustments need be. If you need to prop the head up, that's fine. If you need to prop the knees up with blocks, that's fine as well. But we want to let the gravity sort of pull the knees towards the floor. Let the gravity open the body up. Allow yourself to just lengthen here. Letting the breath soften, and always just bringing yourself back to the breath. Once again, noticing if your mind's wandering. Notice any parts of the body that might be resistant. Staying in the posture. Staying in the stillness and just observing. There'll be a point when you've been in this posture for maybe a little bit longer than you're used to, and you're sort of in untrodden ground. And if you're not used to spending this much time in stillness, the mind will definitely be in untrodden ground. So allow yourself to observe what's happening. Be kind to yourself. And accepting that the mind will wander. There will be resistance. Maybe you can breathe relaxation down into the lower half of your body and just feel it all expand. You might feel a little bit of release even. Just a few more moments. Don't let yourself get caught up waiting. And then bring the hands to the thighs. Gently elevate the knees back up above the hips here. With as little effort as possible, slide that block out from under your coccyx. And give yourself a little bit of movement here. Maybe we just sway the knees from side to side. Maybe we bring the knees out nice and wide and kind of windscreen wiper them. These windscreen wipers are a real sort of classic for Yin Yoga release. This movement comes up a lot, especially in hip sessions like this one. Just observing, not getting too carried away. And then extending the legs away from the body. Savasana. And this is the final pose. This is where all the ingredients sort of cook in. Options to close the eyes and just noticing. And there can even be activity or resistance in Savasana. Notice if you're holding on to anything. Notice where it is. We don't need to spend too long in Savasana. We're not really resting. We're just taking a moment to notice where our body is after those movements. So we'll start to move the body around a little bit. Take a deep breath in and purge anything left over out of the mouth, out through the mouth with that long exhale. We'll do one more of those. Inhale. And the practice is over. Purge it out. We're moving back into the world gently. Coming up into a seated position as we seal our practice with gratitude for ourselves, our bodies, our ability to change and learn and grow and adapt, for the food we eat, the water we drink, and the air we breathe. We take a deep breath in. Namaste.